Hello, and welcome to the Swinging Christies, the Christie Time podcast about Agatha Christie in the swinging 60s. I'm Mark Aldridge. I've written a lot about Agatha Christie, including my latest book, Agatha Christie's Marvel Experts on Wickedness, which you can buy here. Not right now, but in a minute. You can go and buy one, if I haven't already cajoled you into doing so.
Yes, and I'm Gray Robert Brown. I'm a writer, I'm a Christie fan, and today we are live! Yeah, we are. We're live. That worked. Thank you. Oh my God. So,
Thank you for that working.
how are you? We've never done this before.
We have never done this before. No, we've done events before,
Yes.
but we've never
We've
been brave
spoken.
enough to record it and,
no
and then
pressure.
share it with everyone else. But we knew that that's what we wanted to do because, well, a few reasons that we'll talk about. So we wanted to be quite a visual thing, so doing that in person and indeed recording it for YouTube. So hello, YouTube people as well. It's something we really wanted to do.
Yeah, we did an event last year, we did a talk last year, we did a talk in spring as well.
Yes, we did at the unveiling of the marvellous statue. Who here has seen the statue or posed by the statue?
Yes, yeah. Oh, it's so good. Oh, yes.
Actually, I'm
For those
really
listening,
disappointed.
loads of people put their hands up.
Yeah, and also, some people didn't. And they're in Torquay. Like, it's right there. Honestly.
Don't stay for this.
Hot
Go now.
Lord.
Go now. Yeah, actually, speaking of the hands up thing, and we will have to again how to travel audio describe this, but I'd be interested to know. So, how many people have listened to the podcast before? Oh, thanks.
Oh, that's a lot more. That was a large portion of the audience. That was
That's
probably
right,
80% or so.
No shame to those that haven't. We'll introduce it. So we are the Swinging Christies. Our subtitle is Agatha Christie in the 1960s. Our whole ethos is about putting the later books, specifically the books between 1959 and 1970. We've massaged the idea of the 60s ever so slightly.
We defined what a decade is
But
because
time is arbitrary. What does it mean anyway? Let's not get existential so early in the evening. But that's what we're doing. We sort of want to stick up for some lesser loved novels and plays and short stories. And alongside that, we sort of track the fascinating decade that is the 1960s and find sources of it in Agatha's work. And actually, that's another question. How many people in the room would say they've read all of Agatha's novels between 59 and 70? Is that... Yeah, okay. So that's about half, maybe a bit over.
Very good.
Okay. Again, if you haven't, don't worry. I don't think there are any spoilers.
I don't think there are any spoilers in this one. Just a little bit of disappointment that you haven't made it all the way through the 1960s. But, you know, we're setting it, that's what we're for. We're here to tell you to go and read them if you haven't.
We'll persuade you. Yeah, exactly. And we'll sort of give a little indication of what a book is when we come to it. But it's actually a very easy and fun episode to join if you don't know all the books in detail, because we're sort of talking about them in a different way, which is...
aesthetics, so style, look. We really wanted to do something visual, which, as I say, is tough on a podcast, but we keep being prompted by Spotify that keeps telling us video podcasts are really popular. So, well, we might take that on board and actually put this online.
So it's groovy graphics and cool covers.
Groovy graphics and
You have me to blame for the alliterative title.
Yeah.
And yes, we wanted to really drill into what it is that Christie's, particularly her first editions, but a few other of her covers in the 1960s, how they reflect the time, the era that we're focusing on. So we've broken it down into a few themes. So we're going to start with... I didn't practice this. Oh yes, groovy casting full cover. Theme 1, colour. And I should say, by the way, I'm reading notes off my phone. I'm not texting through this podcast.
Can you believe I'm stuck at this event? The person next to me won't stop talking.
Imagine. I'm texting Diana Ross, actually. Because she's alive. Long-term fans will get that reference. If you don't, ask us after. No, okay, so colour is our first theme. So big, bold, bright colours. That's all that it's very much what the 60s are about. So contrasting covers. There's a historian called Dominic Sandbrook. Take a drink, because I'm constantly mentoring. We're constantly mentoring Dominic Sambrook on the podcast.
Yeah.
Because his history books are very useful for us, and he's a fellow podcaster.
Yeah.
But he makes the point that even such is the color saturation of the 1960s, that it was even the period where people started painting their front doors bright colors. That's how much we're talking about color. And I guess because we're seeing a period of greater publishing than ever before, literally just more books out there than ever before, more films and more TV programs. All these things are fighting for the spotlight, and so you need bright colors to stand out, right? Also, we've got the fact that dyes that were once expensive due to the major industrial booms in the last 150 years are suddenly super cheap and super accessible. And we've got color photos, coming into domestic use. The first color supplement was launched by the Sunday Times in the early 60s, and color TV.
Color TV, yeah.
Which I'll throw to you as the color historian,
As
as a screen historian.
So yeah, this is the interesting thing about color on TV is that I always thought it's really funny, like when I was growing up, you're like, why is it the 60s are always in black and white and the 70s are in color? What is that? And it just so happens that November 69 in this country was the switchover date to color TV. The one where ITV and BBC One said all of our programming pretty much, with some exceptions, educational, regional programs, sometimes in black and white. We went to color. So it meant that even though there'd been some color before that, BBC Two, Wimbledon, because like David Attenborough, who was running BBC Two at the time, had promised a certain number of hours in colour every week, but they only had like 4 colour cameras. So he said, right, we'll put them all at Wimbledon, and then we'll be able to show hours and hours of colour TV. But I love that. I love my old TV, and my favourite era is early colour because they haven't worked it out yet. And they're like, people are paid for colour, we're going to give them colour. So the best example is, for our international people who may not know, Coronation Street, very long-running soap opera in this country. When it switches to colour, it's in the middle of a story about a bus crash. The crash is in black and white. They're all in hospital in colour, with like Elsie Tanner with this bright red blood spot all over her. And then you cut back to the Rovers Return, which is their pub, and it's like, suddenly the walls are like lurid green, and the bar is so hyper brown that it's orange, and you're just like, it's all right, you can tone it down. And then you see them over 6 months going, maybe there's too much color. Maybe we do need to tone it down a bit.
I love that. It genuinely looks like someone smashed Heinz ketchup on her forehead. Like it is obscene. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as is the whole point of this presentation, Christie follows suit. So I think the years have been a bit unkind to a cover that Kemper yesterday called A Snooze Fest. Is he here? Where is he? The first edition of Vera Krupp from Side to Side. I think probably because the editions of that are in circulation now are a little bit faded because obviously they're 60 years old by this point. Mm-hmm. Is that good math? But at the time, that would have been a really striking sort of yellow-green image. Yellow-green, of course, being associated with nausea and sickness. And there's the sort of congealed blood almost colour of the Christie name itself. And behold the bright technicolor of the Pale Horse Inn sign, which surely, I mean, it's not what I picture when I think of the Pale Horse. I think of, I don't know, gnarled wood and iron and maybe copper oxidized, but not the sort of bright orange and the bright kind of pinky red. But it's very much in keeping with what's going on at the time. So you can also see the bright color combinations of noted fashion designer Mary Quant through the 60s, who is often credited with sort of popularizing the miniskirt, among other things. And even, I mean, people think of The Sound of Music as quite old-fashioned, right? And in many ways,
film. She's right in the front row.
there you go. No,
well,
there you
got that
go.
album,
Millions others also do, because it was so, not to say you're not special, but the point being, the way it was packaged, it may be set in the 40s, it may be, quote unquote old fashioned, but the way it was packaged, look at the bright pink of her dress and the bright yellow of their dresses and the green of, almost Wimbledon grass, and the purple of the font. Is very much the way of the 60s. But what's our favorite color? Yellow. It's not. It's green for me. I don't know why I said that. Because the slides told me to. But yes, yellow is a perennially fascinating colour, and we've talked about this on the podcast a few times. Actually, it came up in someone's talk today.
Yes, it did.
French edition.
Yeah, French editions, which were always yellow. Yeah.
Who said that?
Um,
Anyway. But yes, we talked about it in our horror episode. But, you know, to this day, we very much think of blood red as the colour of horror and all things kind of lurid and salacious. But for many years, it was bright yellow. I say it all the time, but the first edition of Dracula in the 19th century was a bright yellow. Now it's crimson, the sort of covers that you can get of that now. And French thrillers, French pornographic novels were bright yellow. Detective stories in Italy were called, oh God, there's... Thank you.
Oh,
I was like, there are actually Italians in the audience, and my pronunciation is going to be horrendous. But over time, I think I'm right in saying that word became associated with all things kind of thriller and horror as a kind of genre marker, not just the name of the color, right? And indeed in the clocks, you may remember early on in the clocks, which is a novel from Jung Jung. The Clocks is a novel from 19... No. We were, thank you, for people that don't listen, what Cooper said, who is this? Why does he keep shouting at us? You may remember that there's the Cavendish Secretarial Bureau at the beginning of the novel, and there's a secretary called Edna, and her job is typing up a sensational novel, a semi-pornographic novel.
yes.
Called Naked Love. It's fictional. Agatha writes this herself, but Agatha specifically mentions the lurid jackets of books like these, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She's clearly aware of this tradition, and we talk about that in the sex episode as well, in episode 1. And of course, she's aware of this as a tradition because it's a tradition in which she partakes. I mean, look, we've got the lurid bright yellow for the first edition of By the Prick in My Thumbs. And I know you, me, and Kemper have almost come to fisticuffs over whether yellow pumpkins exist. They do.
It's not that I don't
do.
think they exist. I just think if you're going to describe a pumpkin, yellow is not the first colour that you would come to.
Unless, of course, you're trying to point out to the first edition readers that this novel is salacious and includes the murder of a child. And maybe you would use yellow as a signifier.
Well, then there we go. Mystery solved. We'll have to remind all of the cover designers since that first edition have gone yellow. No, we're going to put a proper orange pumpkin.
It's true. We'll corner David Bourne later and tell us that
say your pumpkins have been the wrong colour.
pumpkins have been the wrong colour all this time.
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, and there's a real flattening of genre. I mentioned everything from porn, thriller, detective, horror. There's a real flattening and a homogenizing of genre that happens around that because they're all just seen as scandalous, right? They're all just seen as salacious. And you can see that in the examples that we've put up on the screen, unless, of course, you can't see it because you're listening. Hello, you can watch it if you want. I'm very conscious of these people that live in my little microphone, because that's where my microphone is. But yeah, so we've got examples ranging from Village of the Damned, which is a sci-fi essentially, but that's got a lurid yellow in the poster. We've got Hitchcock with a yellow banner. We've got the thriller, the first Bond film with yellow. And then we've got the first George Smiley novel, again, a thriller, but opting for that lurid yellow. You're on a bit of a John le Carré.
I am, yeah. Well, it's weird because, sometimes there are authors who instinctively think I'm not going to like their work, and I just instinctively had assumed I wouldn't. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
We famously never read men. That's
It's funny. Someone said to me, actually, and they were trying to prove the point that men don't read women's, like fiction written by women, and I was so the wrong person to go to because I said, look, I read books that are written by women or gay men and nothing else. Like, I'm not interested in any other perspectives.
Yeah, and indeed, we're talking to Agatha Christie fans, so I think we don't have to
And it was
persuade
at an
you
Agatha
that...
Christie events.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was a celebrity who said it to me, but I'm not going to say who.
But get him drunk after, and by God, he'll tell you who it was.
Yeah. Well, let's just say he does a lot of swinging on TV.
As in keys in a bowl.
You may interpret that however you like.
Oh, I know who it is.
Okay, all right.
Get me drunk and I'll tell him. Continuing the colour theme, so we're still on colour. Well, we're actually on a lack of colour now, so we're going to go to monochrome. So also a big theme in the 60s, which it kind of therein proves the point, right? Whenever you go, this was big, you also go, there's a counterculture to it. There's a movement. We did it with our revivalism episode. As soon as you go, the 60s were super swinging, you also go, but there was a big subsection of culture that were harking back to the Victorian era. Or, you know, oh God, there are other examples that we've used. I can't think of. Oh, well, we use The Sound of Music as an example all the time. It's Sandbrook's point about, you say that the 60s weren't swinging for everyone because 19 million people bought that album, and that,
Yeah,
you know,
and you see what music are on TV, and it's not your groundbreaking, the stuff that we watch now that's on repeats. It's stuff that is, completely forgotten. Sitcoms and stuff that nobody really remembered.
Absolutely. But people do remember Truman Capote, I'm assuming, who's a bit of an icon of the 60s, just as Agatha Christie was. But he, in 66, the Grand Plaza Hotel in New York, he held the Black and White Ball. He was a socialite and author. And the pictures on the left are from that night. Obviously, the self-explanatory, the dress code was everyone came in black and white. And indeed, it sort of, I'm sure unwittingly, harkens back to the first edition cover of Breakfast at Tiffany's in the UK. I think, that's the UK first edition, which goes monochrome, other than this slight powdery blue, which is very, it reads as diamonds to me, like Liberty, you know, so it's with the exception of that font. But I think it's clear that that's a byword for chic, for elegance, and you can very much see that theme, indeed, in Christie publishing, as you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, if indeed you can see the screen. But, I mean, behold, the powdery blue font of the third girl on that's the first US edition of Third Girl. Exactly the same design choice that they made for Breakfast at Tiffany's less than 10 years earlier. And admittedly, it's not fully monochrome. We've got the pops of color with the peacock. But then this, By the Prick of My Thumbs, which is also the first US edition, you've got the pop of the sort of blood red, but the House by the Canal illustration remains in black and white. So again, you've got this monochrome idea, sort of maybe marketing Christie as elegant as
It's literary thing. Yes, that's definitely how I interpret it.
Yeah.
It's like she done, because so often in these covers, especially in the 60s, all you really need is the two words Agatha Christie, and so everything else is just sort of an extra onto that give you just a sense of what an Agatha Christie means. It isn't actually, I mean, the peacock is obviously a metaphor in Third Girl, because that's what, you know, the young men who are dressed up, she thinks of them strutting around like peacocks. So it's really lovely to see, though, that Agatha Christie is always the important thing. No matter what you do, Agatha Christie gets her name big and bold there on the cover.
Yeah, definitely. Bigger than Truman Capote's name.
Yes, that's very true.
Quite rightly so. So I'm going to shut up for a bit, and Mark is going to take you through our next theme, which is shapes.
So yeah, we talk about shapes. So we just talked about colour, but now we're talking about, of course, colour blocking, which really does what it says on the tin, this idea that you can get these big, vast swathes of colour. But the idea is that there's sort of higher impact, that actually, rather than it being a literal illustration of something, it makes you feel something. It gives you an impression, again, of something that this story is trying to tell you. It doesn't have to be red, but red does come up quite a lot because it's such a striking cover. And it's really interesting how we see it in such different books. So there is Endless Night, which I know some of you guys came to our book club earlier today and is one of Agatha Christie's all-time classics. But you can see that, again, there is the dead bird with a sort of knife through it, but it's really red and Agatha Christie. Those are the main things that you are seeing.
And segmented, that blocking, the blocking with her name in one block and then the illustration in another, which actually I think is the way that, again, is it sort of subconsciously pointing us towards literary and towards high end, because that's the way that classics are reproduced, right? That is the way that Penguin classics are still.
Yeah, and I think we'll see some of those on the.
Well, getting ahead of myself.
So this is Mark Roscoe on the side here, who was famed for having rooms and so and massive spaces that used all of this colour blocking. And Gray's the one who spotted this connection, but it really does. Endless Night and that, they're really not moving very far away from it. And that's just one indication. Like, it's never just one artist. It's always this just sense that big, strong colours. I mean, I've got my Warhol-esque Swinging Christies bad. lightly inspired by, perhaps, Andy Warhol, but definitely not
If his
anything to do with
estate
the
or
Warhol
lawyers
itself.
ask, it's gently inspired
Yeah, it's an homage
Yeah.
to within creative copyright. But you can see this idea, they all come around at roughly the same time. So you can never quite see the first person that does this. But very often things like book covers, they riff on an idea that's comes through art elsewhere. It's the same idea as when, when people watch a fashion show parade and they go, oh, you couldn't go to Tesco wearing that. Well, you're not supposed to. That's like an extreme version. And then fashion gets interpreted down and down and down until you get to the high street version that might be, oh, actually, strikes are big this year or naturalism's big this year or whatever it is that people are going for.
Yes. I mean, yeah, just to circle back to Rothko, because you ended up at Tesco, and I'm not sure how. Back to Rothko. I just wanted to say, so that's at the Tate, the Red Room, which the Tate Modern, which many of you will have seen. It's in London. It's still there. It's brilliant. It's the murals, the predominantly red murals that Rothko, who was huge in the 60s and actually dies in 1970, so right at the end of the period that we're talking about, but was prominent through the period that Christie was. He actually created those paintings for a high-end, I think it was the Four Seasons restaurant in New York.
Yeah.
But part of his methodology and part of the way that people analyze him now is about blood, Christie. It's about the kind of warmth and the anger and the fury and the fear. I mean, if those words don't describe endless night, then I don't know what does. And also you wanted to talk about colour drenching, which is different to colour blocking.
Yes, it is. So again, this idea that you could just repeat a colour, and it doesn't matter if individual things don't necessarily stand out, but we do see that in something. And it's quite interesting that this idea that you get lots of colour and then finer details in it. We obviously see it very clearly in Endless Night. But how different is Star Over Bethlehem, which is sort of often religious type stories and poems and stuff. They're much lighter, although there is some real darkness in it as well. I mean, the first story, Star Over Bethlehem, is about, Lucifer basically pretending to be an angel. Spoilers, the angel. So it's not like all that, but the naughty donkey, as represented on the cover here, is probably a better representation of the sorts of things you see. But the fact that you could drench at that and just pick out the details like you do in these drenched runes and stuff, I think it's really interesting.
That's a good point, actually. So I guess the red is both works on a festive, here's a lovely Christmas book level, but it also works on a Satan level, on a predicting the future. There's the dark stories where she's going into the future and she's imagining mutations
At the end.
It really is a collection that has to be read to be believed, but we definitely recommend it. And I should say, so the colour drenching in the example above, that's British interior designer David Hicks. And it's still a technique that's popular now, the idea that you would just follow usually one shade or certainly one type of colour all the way through a room. And it's not dissimilar to the principle that leads us to something like, the line drawing of the donkey on Sorrow Over Bethlehem. It doesn't have the illustration, whited out.
No.
Red is drenched, literally drenched across it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I did give you a sneak peek of the Penguin Classics point, but onto colour blocking.
Yes, so colour blocking, you can see, is used obviously not just in Agatha Christie, it's used for lots of other things as well, including film posters, as well as other book covers as well. Lady Chatterley's Lover, which Gray mentioned, which is obviously a big point of discussion at, around some little bit before this time, when 1960. When there's, of course, the obscenity trial and so on. And I still haven't read it, actually. I've just picked up about 3 years. The thing is, I said to Gray, I was like, oh, it can't be that shocking. And he sent me a sentence of 6 words, which I'm not going to repeat. And I went, oh, that's really shocking. So actually, we're really not going to repeat.
I think what actually happened is I said a word that's in that book a lot, and you thought I was calling you it. And I wasn't. I wasn't, to be clear. His mum's in the audience. I would never be so rude to your son. You may disagree with that,
but also because this thing of blocking out the idea that there are little borders, like around Halloween Party there, for example, and even in things like Third Girl over there, that perhaps is meant to be prestigious, that you're putting it up, it's a little bit of art in there, and it's saying that it's special.
Yeah.
It's so different. In David Braun,
for those of us listening or watching the podcast, David Braun from HarperCollins just gave a talk where he was talking about how lurid the covers were for paperbacks all through the sort of 60s onwards, and that Agatha Christie sort of branding wanted to row back on that. So this is before that comes along. So for first editions, they're very much going for prestige, going for, look, these are really popular, but also they're really good and they're really well reviewed. Because one of the things that when I was first starting to research Agatha Christie that really surprised me, slightly naively, is I hadn't realised how well reviewed she was by the big high-end newspapers, that I'd sort of assumed that they'd be a bit snobbish about her. But actually, she gets amazing reviews throughout her career. Theatre critics a bit more snobbish, has to be said. But perhaps that goes with territory.
Damn them.
Yes, damn them.
Damn
Yeah.
those
I've got a
great-
playwright to my left.
those
here,
theatrical
yeah,
people.
maybe we'll row back on. No, theatre critics are lovely people.
Yes, yeah, would never say a word against that. No, it's true. I do think it's a mark of endorsement. You see it a lot in the Hitchcock posters, and often with his book, you can just about see, if you're watching this or in the room, you can just about see his figure, which often appears sort of on the edge, doesn't it? Almost as if to go, Hitch himself is behind this, he
Yes,
endorsed this, and
It's
this
endorsed by
stamp
Aldridge
of approval.
approval.
Yeah.
I also love the idea here that it looks like someone's cut the pumpkin out of the Raisin in the Sun poster. And they've gone, oh, we can reuse that bit. It's fine. We've got an Agatha Christie coming up. We've just cut it into the shape of the
That's
thumb.
genius. I had not thought. How many times have we looked at these slides?
Oh my
They're very
goodness,
good.
too many times. Yeah.
Brilliant. But of course, the best example of color blocking, and you may have anticipated it slightly,
Yeah.
obviously, the master, Andy Warhol.
Yes, this sort of cutting up a repetition as well that we see. It's the sort of thing that, again, is artistic but also high-end, and that we can see reflected in quite a few designs around this type.
This is Campbell's Soup, 61, 62-ish, they were completed.
Yes, so we really feel that you can draw a clear line between what's happening in the art world at the really fashionable end and what's happening with Agatha Christie. Not to take it she wasn't fashionable, but she could remain fashionable all the way through this and picking up those little trends all the way
Absolutely.
through. So done big shapes, and now we're on to patterns. Oh, I was going to wear my shining socks that you brought me. Oh, I've just gone for blue.
How dare you? It's
lots-
the horrible carpet in the Shining Hotel with
Yeah,
the socks
very
in that
expensive,
style.
yeah,
I got
yeah,
yeah, for yeah. For Christmas, that were.
Yes, you did.
Oh no, your birthday.
It's fine.
You don't care about the
Yeah,
finest
you're not
detail.
that- You're not that bothered. But loads and loads of patterns. I'm not wearing a pattern shirt for this because I was a bit worried about the cameras. But I was wandering around today in a pattern shirt because we were doing, obviously, our book club for Endless Night. And as I walked into the green room earlier, Laura Thompson, fantastic Christie biographer, said, oh, you look summery. I love your shirt. So I said, well, yes, because it's meant to look 60s-ish because we're doing Endless Night. And she said, oh, I'd like to have a dress like that. I said, well, maybe that can be my second business now. It's a Swinging Christie inspired clothing.
We keep being asked about merch. We keep being asked about merch. It's
For
true.
loads of, I mean, you can see it here really, but pattern, everyone watches the sewing bee, I'm sure. You know what it's like when these old designs come off and thin.
Have we said on the podcast before that Esme from the Sewing Bee is actually our like patron? We like to think of her as like the patron saint of the podcast. Have you said
Because who's no idea who we are.
No.
Say it.
Oh my God, no. Well, she probably knows who you
She
are.
might. So basically, when we recorded our first episode, we were walking Charterhouse Square, where Poirot's flat is, just happened to be recording down the road from it.
Yeah.
And as we were walking by,
We wanted to go and take a nice photo outside Poirot's flat to kind of commemorate recording the first ever episode, which I think some of you would have seen on Instagram and things like that.
And as we were walking out, across the road was Esme from Sewing Bee. And we're like, oh, wow, it's Esme from Sewing Bee. And that was just lovely, a nice little coincidence. And then a few months later, I was asked to speak to the Women's Institute at Hampshire. It was lovely. It was a really, really good group of people to chat to. And who was the second person on the bill? Esme from Sewing Bee.
Sorry.
And I was like, is she stalking us or are we stalking
You've
her?
not quite told the story the way you told me initially, which was that you texted me and you went, I'm Esme's warm up.
That is also
But one day she'll be our woman. No, we do love Esme, and we love her. And actually, friend of the podcast, Amber Butchart, who regularly pops up as a fashion historian, and loads of her research has gone into this, and we're hoping to do an interview with her at some point. She's fascinating. So, and she's friends with Tina, who's another friend of the podcast. So, yes. Anyway,
So patterns are a
polka
big
dots,
thing,
pop
yeah.
art, pop art, everything.
Yes, which I didn't know until Gray told me. I was just like, oh, op art, I don't really know what that means. And he was like, yes, it actually means like optical illusions. Oh, I see.
Which you
I
can see
understand
clearly in
now.
that first, is it first UK edition of Belgium? It's certainly the first one that credited Sylvia Plath because it first came out under somebody else's name, under Victoria Lucas, a pseudonym.
Yeah,
But
lots
yeah,
of
that's
patterns.
great.
And actually, that
That's
Cast Among the Pictures is very similar in design to the shirt I was wearing earlier, only with slightly different colours. So at least I know I got it roughly right.
Yeah,
in terms of
I'd like to know if anyone can say what they think the shapes on the pale horse are supposed to be.
odd, isn't it? Yeah.
Because I mean, obviously you've got a blood red. This is the first UK edition of the pale horse. I see the blood red. It's almost spears to me. I don't know if it's supposed to be.
3 witches, very nice.
Oh yeah, sure. The black, the three
Yeah,
witches,
sure,
but also
yeah.
the.
As if that was obvious. No, we all saw that.
Sorry, David. But no, I meant at the top as well. I mean, unless it means to imply that there are an infinite number of witches just waiting to be
But
discovered.
sometimes it's just art. Sometimes it's just art.
Do you mean to say, Mark, that sometimes we might just read too deeply into these things?
Well, you say we. I'm going to say at least one of us, yes.
It's true. No, it's or sort of long grass because it's like
But it's
country.
repeated
and-
pattern. It's that
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
fashion if you had to make.
And I always get pupils lined up from the cat among the pigeons. That's what that
really?
pattern reads to me. It's all blobs that are almost they're sort of child height. I feel.
What on profit is children come bigger than that? Like,
Wait, what?
they're not all sort of like an inch and a half tall.
Okay, we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the next theme, which is headlines. So it's quite a short one, this, because it's quite self-explanatory. Basically, big text was in as well. So I think actually one of the things we wanted to debunk, and I was sort of mocking Kemper by saying when he called the Mirror Cracked cover a snooze fest, I think there is a perception that a lot of the certainly UK first edition 60s Christie covers are quite pedestrian and there's not much of interest in them because we know, or probably many of you know, that Christie was quite particular about her covers and she was not keen on things like Poirot being represented in illustration or photographs. So that often meant that the fallback was text and a small designer and easy design. As I hope we're proving, there's a lot to see in terms of how those covers were squarely fitting into the aesthetic of the time. Even just relying on words, as Agatha Christie's 13 for Luck, that first edition does, or indeed the first edition of Another Country by Jane Forburn, which is another great book of the 60s, and he's a contemporary of Christie's. Rely on, or not rely, and make a design choice out of that big headline text. Stacked in particular was a big trend of the time, and making bold statements and the absence, the Beatles are an exception, but aren't they always? But the absence usually of sort of graphics around that, just letting the text speak for itself, is you were kind of saying about Agatha's name selling it alone.
Yeah.
And as you can see, it has real cross genre appeal. We have everything from the sci-fi drama Doctor Who with the Stats logo there, to Z-Cars, that's a police procedural, to tones on second wave feminism with the feminine mystique, to satire with That Was the Week That Was, to the dystopian Shirley Jackson. I shouldn't talk anymore about Shirley Jackson because we met a lovely listener on the way here. He's probably here somewhere. Hi, who told me I ruined her holiday by recommending a Shirley Jackson. So I'm going to stop. She was politer than that. But I'm going to stop recommending Shirley Jackson because
Not a poolside read.
it's not a poolside read, but it is very good. And because it's in a country house, it's very Christie. So we would recommend that. And we did an episode on Shirley.
We did, yes.
But yeah, big text. Anything you want to say about big text?
No, just that again, I think is a sort of prestige thing and it's interesting. So I don't think if you were like a new author or they were just doing a bit of perhaps romantic fiction, whatever, you're not going to get away with this. No, sell it on. This is special. It doesn't need all the bells and whistles.
Yeah.
And that's what we get from Agatha Christie.
Defo. And I just specifically wanted to, I feel like talking about 13 for Luck is a tradition for us in Torquay now, because we made a point about it last year, for those of you that were here last year. So I feel like now we're going to have to work, every time they're kind enough to invite us back, we're going to have to work in a point about that. It's our lucky charm. Femme. French for woman. So the femme fatale is another theme
Yeah.
running throughout. So the femme fatale had long been a state. By the time we get to the 60s, the femme fatale had long been, and sort of sexualized images of women had long been, unfortunately, a staple of crime, thriller, pulpy, horror genres. Various examples you can see here for a few decades. But what happens in the 60s is really interesting because it sort of smashes into increasing liberation for women. So we talked about all this in our sex episode way back when, episode 1. It'll always be available. Just scroll back in your feed if you haven't heard it, or listen to it again. Why not? But we talk about this. We talk about advancements in equal pay, abortion rights, contraceptives, divorce rights. All this is going on alongside Christie Publishing, and just the continued understanding that sex sells, and they're showcasing the modern fashions of the time. I think what's quite interesting, so you often you get this refrain of women kind of draped and posed. What's interesting is it's not exclusive to heterosexual narratives, because one of the examples on the screen is The Price of Salt, which you might know better as Carol by Patricia Highsmith. We were talking about Highsmith earlier. We've got Highsmith premier biographer in the house, in fact, Andrew Wilson. But that first edition has got not one but two women sort of posed. And you see it in Christie too. You've got all three of the titular third girls on this edition. This isn't the first edition.
No, it's a book club edition, and I remember picking up years ago because I always felt that the one in the middle was Barbara Streisand, and I just feel that they, as we saw with brilliant Tom Adams' talk from David, very often beers are taking, this isn't a Tom Adams cover, but artists will take photos and stuff that they found and make only the tiniest changes when they sort of paint them up. So yeah, I feel that this is really ripped from the headlines, ripped from like what you're seeing in fashion magazines and movie magazines and stuff like that. So yeah, I've always loved that cover.
Yeah, and the other Christie example we've got is an early Fontana. It's the only Fontana in the presentation, actually. We had to make an exception because it's so swinging. Is that supposed to be Princess Chic Heart?
I suspect so, but the really weird thing is that, because Cat Among the Pigeons is weirdly sexual in some ways anyway, in the way that it talks about the girls in the story. So it's a little bit strange, because it's set in a girls' school. But it's just like almost all of the covers of Cat Among the Pigeons that are paperbacks are so unrepresentative of the story. It really is, because they just go, women, eh? Lots of women in this one, so they must all be sexy. And so that's what we get. And there's one where they're sort of draped over Poirot, sort of standing there in the middle.
Oh, God, is there?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
But this is quite what, because do you think about Cat Among the Pigeons? Do you think about glamorous women and people escaping to a plane? No. That is absolutely not your main takeaway, but
No, but you do
you got the book now.
Yeah. But you do think about girls' school and a thriller plot on the side, which if you squint,
Exactly.
it's kind of like not quite right. But
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
exactly what you mean. I mean, I would say, is there an argument to say that if that is supposed to be the Princess Shaista, is that a bit of a spoiler? Because, oh my gosh, well, there's something around her age. That is the spoiler.
That is the spoiler. Well done.
You don't have to read it now. No, you should. It's very good. But yeah, and the other example, you've got the famous sort of Mrs. Robinson scene depicted on the Graduate first edition. You've got a pervy, male-gazing Billy Liar looking up at
Not unrepresentative, to be fair.
but you've also significantly so much was Sean Connery as Bond linked with sex and young women, and so much was that depiction rooted in that they project, I hope consensually, the opening titles over this belly dancer of From Russia with Love, and they literally project his name over her midriff. That's how directly we're talking about it. It's obviously all a bit icky to modern eyes, but it's not something that Christie publishers were they weren't in a vacuum. It was not something that they weren't aware of and doing in their own way. So our last big theme, Mark, take it away,
is psychedelia.
So Matt keeps mentioning LSD.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So,
In your prosecco this evening? No.
yeah.
You're going to have a really good night.
In the daiquiri. You thought it was Camo, eh? Yes.
But it's actually, this is the things that the drug taking and psychedelia generally, that is the thing that when, I guess the elevator pitch of this, when you say, what is the Swinging Christie? Why is she interested in the 60s? The one I always say is, well, do you know that there's one that's all about drug taking and LSD, and that is actually how the whole plot develops and is unraveled? And so once you say this, people go, well, really? It's a yes, and it's in the swinging 60s, and it's right down in fashionable Chelsea. So there's loads and loads of examples of that. So that's obviously within the text, and we talk about that a lot in the podcast, of course. But also, lots of the aesthetic sort of ties in with this, of the sort of things like text being
Like woozy. The idea is almost that it's almost that you are to recreate the idea that you're almost having a trip whilst looking at these
you're
visuals.
drifting in and out of something.
Yeah,
It isn't
yeah.
quite, you're not seeing that in a straight line, because that isn't how you're sort of perceiving
Oh, I'm
it.
seeing that in a straight line. You say that?
Well, that you had more Prosecco, which is the anti-LSD. But we see that now in lots of things, and including obviously things like Beatles and so on. But You Only Live Twice is an example there. But really, this is such a tradition, I think, for saying, oh, it's a 60s piece. Like, that's something you'd expect to see in Austin Powers or something. But Agatha Christie does get in there. So this is a book club. Oh, is it an American first edition of it?
It's an American book club, isn't it?
Yes.
US American edition, 1968. The notes won't fail us. But for all of you that think that we're so clever that we just read it all off the top of our heads in the podcast, you're realizing now we do in fact have a couple of notes in front.
Yeah. Because you know you're guaranteed to forget a year the moment you have to say
Oh,
it.
exactly.
Or
That's cool, yes. And it's difficult as well because often the US editions are the year after, and certainly the US book club edition is the year after in this case. So it's
Yeah,
the end of it.
yes, yeah, absolutely. So you can see that really is sort of tying into lots of the grooviness, really. It's grooviness.
Yeah, definitely. And we pulled out the "You Only Live Twice" logo, which was reproduced on in bookshop in shop windows, in W. H. Smith windows, and on film posters, because the twice, obviously the gag being that you're seeing it twice, and it's doing exactly the same thing that Endless Night text is doing. And I guess the other thing to say is Psychedelia was the logical theme to land on at the end of it, because it's basically everything we've told you about so far and the kitchen sink thrown in. So it's colour, it's pattern, it's nothing left out. It's shape, it's blocking, it's the lack of blocking, it's no holds barred. You can see that possibly most clearly in the Magical Mystery Tour vinyl cover, and indeed in Sgt. Pepper vinyl cover as well. People often say, in fact, that the transition of the Beatles' White Album cover into the psychedelic covers that's almost the transition that the 60s goes on. And as we say, Christie is no exception.
Yeah, and we can see some of these ideas obviously represented in things like Cats Among Pigeons cover and so on. So, but this is really tying to surrealism, which is only really one step beyond a lot of what we see on the previous slide there, really.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, surrealism is prominent from way earlier, and it's almost like Psychedelia is a new generation's idea of surrealism, isn't it? And yes, that's the US first edition.
US first edition, very stylized, quite surreal as well. And it's also, if you don't get sort of sexy women on your Cat Among the Pigeon cover, you get a cat as well. I don't know if there are any cats.
Even now they're publishing, dare I say, where's David? Even now they're publishing Cat Among the Pigeons. And there is famously no cat pigeons. It's a metaphor.
I feel like that's one of those ideas that someone presents as a joke one day. We could do a Cat Among the Pigeons with a cat on the cover and see what happens with that.
I like that next to the dumb witness with the dog, actually, because it's a friend of mine who doesn't know Christie so well was like, oh, but so does that mean there's not a dog in Dumb Witness? And I was like, no, there's very much a dog in Dumb Witness.
Yeah.
No Cat Among the Pigeons.
But also surrealism and things like Cover Her Face by P.D. James, which big Agatha Anorak, Trickery in This Room as well. Well, no, that's the whole reason why Sleeping Murder is called Sleeping Murder, because it was called Cover Her Face. And then just because it sat away for 2 decades, someone got there first, and so by the time it came out...
So in the 60s...
In the 60s,
when that was published, they
Face.
have to dig out Sleeping Murder from their archives and rename it Sleeping Murder in readiness for publication in 26.
Yeah, but the really funny thing is that when it comes out, there's a few things that are sort of like,
we don't really know who this P.D. James is. This might just disappear as a book. People might never know. Actually, for a while, they kept the name. And
Which
then
is
they were
fair
like,
enough, because P.D. James has not been short of slightly catty things to say about Christie over the years. So it's fair that the Christie life said
if you're in Laura Thompson's biography, if you want to go check that. Magic Toy Shop, though, as well, Andrew Carter, very good example of surrealism making its way onto these covers. And this is the Endless Night film at the bottom, which I feel like we've chatted about a lot today. It's come up a few times.
Yeah, it came up at book club, didn't it? It's nice because we felt like we were banging the drum for it. It's from 72, so it's a little bit out of our time span, but it is very swinging.
Yeah.
And
we have the real moments of it with sort of visions and stuff, because that's basically what the Endless Night quote that serves a purpose in the book, and lots of visions and sort of ideas and flash forwards are in the film, because actually it's all told in retrospect. You forget it pretty quickly, but you open with, I won't say who, a significant person telling their story throughout the film, and so there's plenty of chances to. Are you going to do the noise of the wow? He was annoying me
the cat from
for like
Grandma
the
Pigeons.
whole weekend when we watched it. Every time there's a surreal moment, you go, wow, wow, wow. And there we go.
That could have also been Bobby and Fuzzy.
Yeah, that could also been a cat among the pigeons.
Yeah, it's true. So basically, if you weren't already convinced that Christie is thoroughly swinging, and not just that, but her publishers were aware of that, and the way that she's presented may seem out of touch now, or may seem, I don't know, snooze fest. I'm really coming for Ken, but I'm not. Well, I love him. He knows his in good jest. But yeah, think twice next time you think about that when you're collecting your facsimile editions or your first editions, because actually the way they're presented is very much in step with the current moment, and it's the argument we always make, which is that she's got so much to say about the world around her that doesn't stop at 1945 or whenever the golden age is supposed to stop. That goes right through, and we must continue to listen to older women and support them and fight for them, which is what we're doing.
Absolutely, and we've got a lot more to come. So
yes,
this is just a selection of some of our
previous episodes.
But this is episode 25, I think. This
will be episode 25.
But we've got so many plans as well still. But
we do.
If you do think that there's a big topic that you'd like us to discuss, by all means, get in touch with us.
Yeah,
we really love to hear that. So you can obviously follow us.
Oh yes, well obviously subscribe and please rate and review it. Maybe nicely.
So much, yeah. It really does, because it really helps the algorithm for people they search like.
Yes, let's game the algorithm. Let's beat our
Silicon
Valley overlords.
So let's try and game
with
them
good
back.
Devon spirit.
Yeah,
that's the plan.
But other than that, please do get in touch with us about really anything to do with Agatha and 60s. If you've got any ideas, that would be lovely to hear as well. I've got to read all this out. Greg didn't read it the other day because he had to read one out. I was like, what? What is our handle on Instagram? So you can find us on Instagram at Christie_time. You can find us on Blue Sky at Kristen. You can find us on Blue Sky at Christie.
See, I normally
Social. You can email us at christietimepod@gmail.com. That's prod productions.
Or
website,
prodding someone.
Or prodding. Our website is christieTime.com. You can find Gray at his website, grayrobertbrown.wixsite.com/GrayRobertBrown. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Mark Aldridge and on Blue Sky at markaldridge.info, which is also my website. And after this is over, before you dash to the bar, maybe dash to the bookshop, because if you would like to pick up a copy of one of my books, and there's a selection of swinging titles there as well that they brought.
Yeah, them well.
So if there's one you think, actually, do you know what, I don't have that in my library, now is the time to pick it up as well.
And do obviously stay subscribed to the feed. We've already recorded a Halloween and a Christmas special. We're dropping new episodes every month. We sort of dropped the thing of it being bonus episodes. They're not bonus episodes anymore. We're just monthly. It's just... we're keeping swinging. You can't. And speaking of, yes, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for listening and watching if you have. And keep swinging.
Keep swinging.
Thanks for coming. The Swinging Christies is a Christie Time project by Dr. Mark Aldridge and Gray Robert Brown. This talk took place on the 19th of September, 2025. Our artwork was designed by Bartlett Studios, and our music is by Dark Golan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.